Joined on the podium by Miguel Sossa from the University of Michigan.
Pleasure to be here.
Miguel, we didn't think that anyone from the USA cared about climate change, and here you are.
Well, we've come a long way. It took 30 hours to get from Michigan, and I would say the United States cares quite a bit about climate change. The government currently under the Obama administration has been trying to push forward an agenda that makes sense for the U.S. and for the world. The biggest challenge for us is the political divide between those that believe that climate change actually has an adequate place in the marketplace and those that feel that environmental pursuits are actually the cause of slowing down the economy. I believe that we're here as students of the University of Michigan and the Herb Institute to learn as much as we can so that we can come back to our university and educate our students on both the pros and cons of climate change policy in hopes that we can sort of push forward an agenda that makes sense later on. We believe we're going to be the future leaders, and how else to learn than to come and see it from those that are doing it.
And joking aside, I mean, there's plenty in the US to be optimistic
Sure.
about. You look at the RGGI initiative, and California has obviously launched a number of stringent sort of emissions caps. There is a lot going on, perhaps below state level.
Yeah. I think on a local level what you're finding, and we're looking even at cities in the northwest of the United States like Seattle and Portland who really push forward a green agenda on their city development. There are a lot of people here in Durban that are anxious to see sort of what the U.S.'s negotiation process will be and negotiation stance. But to your point, there's a lot going on at a city level, state level, and certainly there are federal level agendas that are happening with the EPA to push forward an agenda that makes sense.
And I noticed President Obama recently, I think he recently passed an emissions cap on vehicles, or at least they're trying to. University of Michigan, obviously Detroit is the capital of Michigan, and Detroit's also the home of motor cars in the USA. What's happening on that scale in the US? Are General Motors and Ford implementing green strategies?
Absolutely, and I think you find it in a couple of different ways. So Ford and GM are both creating electric vehicles. They've also led the way in terms of emission reductions in the US for both automotive and some of their pursuits and their fundraising and volunteering aspects. And you'll see that the emissions that are happening in the car industry are actually decreasing quite a bit. So it'll be an interesting space to see what Detroit plays in that role.
Absolutely, and part of the reason you're here for the next 2 weeks is the carbon markets.
Sure.
How optimistic are you about carbon markets? Because obviously recently we've seen a carbon price crash. There's a lot of unsettlement due to the Kyoto Protocol. Will or won't that continue? How much would you put how much money would you put on the carbon markets continuing?
You know, I think we've seen, as to your point, we've seen the carbon market kind of stymie and slow down. And what we're here to present this week is sort of an angle on how do you professionalize the carbon markets. We were joking, I think, earlier that carbon markets are a bit boring for most people. But if you look at mechanisms for really trying to reduce the actual climate change initiatives that are happening as a result of global warming, carbon is at the epicenter. And when you're trying to find ways that speak to both the economic leaders of the world and the business folks that are investing their money, you need to put in a dollar amount. And what better way to do that than to take a look at a market that can equitably distribute that burden, as well as place a means for people to actually invest and to grow. So if I was a betting man, I'd say go ahead and put your money in carbon. I think it's going to be the way to sort of pursue that angle.